Hello everyone and welcome back to another session of Dark Souls Remastered PvP and another weapon showcase. Today we are taking a look at the Stone Greatsword, which is unfortunately a very popular weapon right around now. This weapon is easily acquired by purchasing it from Shiva of the East, and as you guys are probably familiar, the two-handed R2 has a Tranquil Walk of Peace effect. So, needless to say, that's why it's popular among all of the ganks that we're seeing right now. So let's get started with the basics on this weapon. It requires 40 strength and 10 dexterity in order to wield, and because it upgrades with Twinkling Titanite, at plus 0 its base damage is 148 physical and 100 magic, with a C scaling in strength, a C scaling in dexterity, and an E scaling in intelligence, and at plus 5 its base damage is 220 physical, 150 magic, and its scalings have remained unchanged. And that basically sums it up. So let's get started with the pros and the cons of this thing. First and foremost, it's got a relatively standard Greatsword moveset with its R1s. There's nothing strange about them, nothing overly different about them. So that's actually a pretty decent thing. It's got a decent ability to stun someone. Overall, it's a pretty good weapon in that regard. Damage-wise, again, no major complaints. You're easily able to hit over 400, so there's no issues with that. And aside from that, I mean, the one-handed R2 is really satisfying to land. It can act as a decent roll catch, but it's not the most useful two-handed R2 in a Greatsword in my opinion, so it is what it is. Of course, though, the biggest pro of the weapon is that two-handed R2 that casts Vow of Silence. And with that, it does use 200 of its 800 durability per use, but generally you don't need to use it more than once in a fight. You just generally don't. So keep that in mind at the very least, but don't worry too terribly much about it. As long as you remember to repair your weapon on a regular basis or carry a repair powder with you, you'll be fine. You won't have any major problems with using this weapon. Now, regarding the cons of the weapon, because every weapon has to have some, first and foremost would be the weight. This thing weighs a ton. It weighs 18 units. For a Greatsword class weapon, not an Ultra Greatsword, but for a Greatsword, 18 units is tremendous. That weighs more than the Black Knight Great Axe. That is ridiculous if you kind of think about it like that. It also weighs more than the Golem Axe. It weighs a lot, needless to say. It weighs more than the Zweihander, it weighs more than the standard Greatsword. This thing is heavy. That's really the biggest con of the weapon. It's probably the only one that's worth considering, but it's heavy. Beyond that, though, the swing speed, it's pretty standard for a Greatsword. It is technically slightly slower than a Bastard Sword and Claymore, so keep that in mind. That does make it slightly easier to parry, but beyond that, the only move on this weapon that's really true parry bait is the one-handed R2. I mentioned it earlier on, it's really satisfying to land that attack, but that's because it's so easily parried or backstabbed. And even still, with the two-handed R2, when you're starting to cast it, if you get kicked or you get stunned out of your cast, or you just get backstabbed while you're going for it, well, it is what it is. I mean, you kind of deserve it. It's an easy thing to punish. That said, for those who you do get in that cast, they are, in a way, sitting ducks. It's something we've all experienced at some point in time. When we invade a world, you run into a gank, and that's hard enough to deal with as it is. But one of them pulls out the Stone Greatsword or Tranquil Walk of Peace, and you can't roll. There are ways, of course, to successfully evade Tranquil Walk of Peace, and they do apply to this, for the most part. Vow of Silence is not one of them, though, so casting Vow of Silence and running up before they can, use the R2, not going to help you out. That's something to keep in mind. That said, if they are only using this weapon as a main weapon, they don't have a switch, they're not using it in a gank, they're not going for any magic, it's actually really easy to counter. You just turtle up, you'll be fine. That said, that's all I've got on this weapon. I hope you guys have enjoyed this one in one way or another, found it helpful in some capacity. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.